Today you'll be listening to a poem called Ballad of Birmingham, and this poem is by Dudley Randall. He was a famous African-American poet, and he started a publishing company that was very successful. But before that, he had written a lot of poems, and this is considered his absolute most famous poem. It was actually written 6 years after the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, and it was his way to reflect on it and make sure that people didn't forget the horror of that day. So please listen carefully as I read this poem to you, and please try and notice how the speaker changes and it goes back and forth. Ballad of Birmingham by Dudley Randall. On the bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. Mother dear, may I go downtown instead of out to play and march the streets of Birmingham in a freedom march today? No, baby, no, you may not go, for the dogs are fierce and wild, and the clubs and hoses, guns and jails aren't good for a little child. But mother, I won't be alone. Other children will go with me and march the streets of Birmingham to make our country free. No, baby, no, you may not go, for I fear those guns will fire. But you may go to church instead and sing in the children's choir. She has combed and brushed her night dark hair and bathed rose petals sweet and drawn white gloves on her small brown hands and white shoes on her feet. The mother smiled to know that her child was in a sacred place, but that smile was the last smile to come upon her face. For when she heard the explosion, her eyes grew wet and wild. She raced through the streets of Birmingham calling for her child. She clawed through bits of glass and brick, then lifted out a shoe. Oh, there's the shoe my baby wore. But baby, where are you? All right, so let's go back and take a look at each stanza, and we'll just make a few notes. So please, off to the right over here, please identify who is the speaker in the first stanza. I'll give you a second to pause and do that. Write that over on the right-hand side. All right, so hopefully you identified the speaker over here as being the child, and specifically this is a female child. If you want to write that, that would be fine. So this female child is questioning. Go ahead and take a second to identify the speaker in the second stanza, and you can do that right along the side as well. You should have identified the speaker in the second stanza as the mother. So the child questions in stanza 1, and the mother's reply is in stanza 2. Now let's check out stanza 3. Does it stick with the mother or go back to the child? I'll give you a second to determine that. Hopefully you have that this again is the child. She is pleading with the mother to let her go because she's not going to be alone. Other people will be there and she'll be safe. And then let's take a look at stanza 4. Again, this stanza is the mother's response. It's interesting here that the mother does not let her go to the march because she thinks that the march will be violent. However, she does say, no, go ahead and go to church because in church you'll be safe. It's important also to notice in stanzas 1 through 4 that the author definitely used dialogue. So this was a conversation between the mother and the child. And the reason that you know that is the quotation marks here that are showing that someone is speaking. They're not like when someone was quoting the text. This is showing actual dialogue conversation between two parties, and it was the mother and the child. All right, starting in stanza 5, there is no more dialogue. The conversation has gone away. There's some in stanza 8, but the back and forth that was taking place is no longer. So let's identify who is this stanza talking about. Is this stanza talking about the mother or the child? I'll give you a second to make that distinction. And you should have that this is the child. This stanza shows that she is getting ready to go to church. At this time, going to church was a big deal, and people always wore their best clothes. So she is going to bathe herself so that she is nice and clean and smells good. And she puts her cute little white gloves on and her little white shoes because she's getting dressed up, because that is how, in this time period, people dressed very formally to go to church. So far as wearing gloves, even cute little white gloves. All right, and then please make this distinction down here as well. The last three stanzas are only the mother. So the child is, the child went to church, the child is gone, and this is the mother reflecting. She's happy because she knows that her child is somewhere that she will be safe, and she feels good about sending her to church. Church is definitely a safe place until church is an unsafe place. So this quickly, in stanza 7, the mood quickly changes. Please note that in stanza 7, the mood changes completely. It was happy and light, and now it has completely changed because there has been violence. And then you can see in stanza 8, the mother has raced down to the church, and she finds her daughter's shoe but cannot find her daughter. What does the reader have to make at the end of the poem? Hopefully you answered inference. The reader can make an inference that perhaps this little girl was one of the 4 girls that was killed in the bombing, or maybe she will turn up later in the rubble. We don't know. The reader has to make an inference, and the reader is left with questions here. At this time, this concludes this video. You can check back on the website or with your teacher for further instructions.